Monday, December 8th, 2025. Translate. Would you give the invocation? Sure.
Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us all here, bringing us all together. I appreciate the wisdom that you have bestowed upon our district. I pray that we can move forward in the best direction possible for our constituents. I pray that we get water into our district, that we can overcome this drought either through innovation or the rains that you will bring upon us. Heavenly Father, thank you. Amen.
Amen. Director Dry, would you lead us in the pledge of allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. I will note at this point in time, we do not yet have a quorum. We will be tabling all items requiring approval until we have a quorum. Madam Secretary, the introduction of guests.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Today online, we have AJ Carlson from EBID, Anthony Collin, Caitlin Owens from New Mexico Office of State Engineers, Delise Maciel from EBID, James Narvise from EBID. We have Matthew Vogel. We have Phil King. And that is all that is present online today.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. If we could have an introduction of the guests that are present, starting with Georgie.
Hello, my name is Georgie Ellis, and I am the social media manager in the Arkansas. Good morning, Leah Diaz, EBID.
Rob, part of the Office of the State Engineer. Mariano Rodriguez with EBID down in Hatch.
Thank you all very much for being here today. We welcome you to this special board meeting of the Butte Irrigation District, where we will be canvassing the vote. The next item on the agenda is public input. 3 minutes will be permitted for each participant who chooses to give public input, and no more than 30 minutes total will be spent on this agenda item monthly. Is there anyone present who would like to give public input? Is there anyone online who would like to give public input? Hearing none, we are concluded with public input. That brings us to the approval of board minutes. I will note that we still do not have a quorum, so that item will be tabled until we do have a quorum. That brings us to the canvass and certification of the 2025 Board of Directors election. I will note again that we do not have a quorum, and so we will table that item until we do have a quorum. That brings us to the Water Resources Committee. The Water Resources Committee met twice this month. We met the Monday after our regularly scheduled board meeting, and we met a second time. First, a topic that we discussed at both of those meetings is the copper flat mine. On November 13th, individuals with the copper flat mine had requested to give a presentation to a committee of the board at Butte Irrigation District. Present were myself, Dr. King, Josh was present virtually, and Steve, I think it's Crosby, from New Mexico Copper Corporation, and Andrew Maloney from Tula Resources. They presented a proposed change to their permit, changing from a wet tailings pond to a dry stacking tailings pond, discussing a reduction in water usage from 6,000 acre-feet a year to approximately 1,000 acre-feet a year. And they were interested in EBID support. This was discussed at the Water Resources Committee meeting the following Monday. Numerous questions were asked by the committee members. We had an additional meeting, I believe it was the following Monday, with members of the New Mexico pecan growers, as well as Dr. Maxier from Hillsborough, to understand more about the continuing concerns developed in Butte Irrigation District with regards to the impacts to inflows into the Bio Reservoir, as well as the risk of contamination from the tailings. Also discussed at our regular monthly meeting was the draft end of year allocation. It's expected that there will be carryover balance. Well, I think Dr. King will cover this in his presentation, but we discussed carryover balances and had a lengthy discussion of trying to determine at what level of usable storage will EBID be calling for a release. Things that I feel fairly comfortable saying that the committee was in agreement with. If the available supply is less than 100,000 acre feet, we will not be releasing water from the reservoir. If the available supply is in excess of 200,000 acre feet, we will likely be releasing water from the reservoir. This year, we are likely to have an amount that's between those two numbers. So what is it that we're going to do? And there are many moving parts to that decision. And the committee continues to discuss it at length at our monthly committee meetings in order to give useful guidance to the board on what we think is appropriate. At this time, we do not have any suggestions either for regular policy of the district or with regards to the upcoming year's allocation. I stand for questions regarding the Water Resources Committee report. With that, I will note the arrival of Director Colquitt, which brings us to 5 board members, and we have a quorum. We will return to the tabled items. The first one is the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda? Hearing none, without opposition, the agenda is approved. I note the arrival of Director Kleschel. That brings us to the approval of the board minutes, the regular scheduled board meeting of November 12th. I noted a correction at the bottom of page 3 to Madam Secretary. That correction was regarding the City of Las Cruces being a 4-year planning entity. They are a 40-year planning entity. So that should be 40 and not 4. Are there any other additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, I'll accept a motion to approve the minutes of November 12th, 2025.
Motion so made. Second.
I have a motion from Director Kleschel, seconded by Director Colquitt, to approve the minutes of November 12th, 2025. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Being the president, the ayes have it. The motion passes unanimously. That brings us to the canvass and certification of the 2025 Board of Directors election. I hand it over to Madam Secretary. What was your official title?
Election board chair.
I hand it over to the election board chair, Marilyn Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. President. We do have a spreadsheet here to tally the votes. I just want to show that the spreadsheet, how it will work. So we have a master sheet at the front that will calculate all the votes. We did have 3 polling locations. We had one north at our Hatch Yard, we had one centrally here at our Las Cruces office, and we had another down south at our Chamberino yard. So and we also had absentee ballots. So we do have 4 tabs here to calculate the votes. I just want to demonstrate how it works. So on the absentee, we have counters here. If we go to our master, we'll see that each has 4. So let me clear the tallies.
There was one missing from the last page. I think so, the one before, or say that.
They're all at 0, but I can go.
I did see one.
Oh, it's not Rafa, it would have been an opposed person, and you're right, here it is on the master page. I may note that, this was an uncontested election. And I guess we will start with the absentee votes. I probably will need assistance from someone to read a few of the votes for me, please.
You want me to do the computer?
Sure, that would be great. John, you go, or I can go.
That's right.
Okay. So with the absentee votes, the voter does have to submit an affidavit of absentee, form that is notarized. And I did go through and verify that we did have all of these and that these were, they were proper electors. I received a call. There was one vote that they did not have an affidavit of absentee voter included with it. I don't know if it was in the inner envelope. I have not opened the inner envelope. I'm not sure if I should open this inner envelope to see if it's in or not.
Would you state that again, Madam Secretary?
So there was one vote that I received. How they were to do it is they were supposed to put in the outer envelope, they're supposed to put their affidavit of absentee vote and a designation form if they're a corporation. I did receive one absentee vote that only had the inner envelope that's supposed to have the ballot. I do not know if the affidavit of absentee ballot is inside or not.
Mr. Lynch, what is your recommendation?
I think it would be permissible to open, to see if
Okay,
it is in there. And just start revealing who the voter is.
of course. I did verify that it is, a person who can vote, however, if not, unless they have their absentee affidavit. The absentee affidavit is here, it is valid, and it is notarized. So we will count this vote. So that makes a total of 12 absentee votes. And I think.
Let's not count it first. Well, actually, you didn't identify the voter, so that's
Right.
why.
Yeah, we don't want to identify the voter as such.
So now you're good.
So on this ballot, the first vote is Casey Christ. For precinct number 2.
Mr. Brandon.
All right,
This is absentee.
If we got complete, yes, sir.
And then precinct 4 is Greg W. Precinct 6, Rafa Rubirosa. Precinct 8, Prescott Colquitt.
Wise choices.
And those are the only votes on that ballot.
Mr. Franzoy.
what would you like me to do in the event that there is multiple different people presented for election when this is kind of binary?
I think we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Okay, on the next ballot for precinct 2, Casey Christ. Precinct 4, Greg W. Precinct 6, Rafael Riverosa. Precinct 8, Prescott Colquitt. And those are the only votes on that ballot. Okay, on the next ballot, precinct 2, Casey Christ. Precinct 4, Greg W. Precinct 6, Rafa Riverosa. Precinct 8, Prescott Colquitt. And those are the only votes in that ballot. Precinct 2, Casey Christ. Precinct 4, Greg W. Precinct 6, Rafa Riverosa. Precinct 8, Prescott Colquitt. And those are the only votes in that ballot. Precinct 2, Casey Christ. Precinct 4, Greg W. Precinct 6, Rafa Riverosa. Precinct 8, Prescott Colquitt. And those are the only votes in the ballot. Precinct 2, Casey Christ. Precinct 4, Greg W. Precinct 6, Rafa Riverosa. Precinct 8, Prescott Colquitt. And those are the only votes on that ballot. Precinct 2, Casey Christ. Precinct 4, Greg W. Precinct 6, Rafa Riverosa. Precinct 8, Prescott Colquitt. And those are the only votes in that ballot. Precinct 2, Casey Christ. Precinct 4, Greg W. Precinct 6, Rafa Riverosa. Precinct 8, Prescott Colquitt. And those are the only votes in that ballot. Precinct 2, Casey Christ. Precinct 4, Greg W. Precinct 6, Rafa Riverosa. Precinct 8, Prescott Colquitt. Only votes on that ballot. Precinct 2, Casey Christ. Precinct 4, Greg W. Precinct 6, Rafa Riverosa. Precinct 8, Prescott Colquitt. And those are the only votes on the ballot. Precinct 2, Casey Christ. Precinct 4, Greg W. Precinct 6, Rafa Riverosa. Precinct 8, Prescott Colquitt. And those are the only votes on the ballot. Precinct 2, Casey Christ. Precinct 4, Greg W. Precinct 6, Rocco Rubiosa. Precinct 8, Prescott Colquitt. And those are the holding votes. If you can look at that, Marilyn, just to make sure, I think they just mismarked that.
They did this mark and it looks as though they put they put their initials next to it, that it was marked in error.
On precinct number 4, they marked the box that didn't have a name, and then they initialed it and marked Greg's box.
And that is all of the absentee ballots that we received. Next, we can move to the north unless there's any questions or. Okay, we're gonna go to our hatch yard.
There's something in the chat. Would you check to see if that's okay, thank you.
The AI
Yeah.
meeting notes.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay. All right, I think I can probably. Okay, yeah, thank you so much, Lovely, I appreciate your help. All righty, the first vote we have here, this is Hatch, you're on the Hatch tab, yes. We have, for district, precinct 2, Casey Christ. Precinct 4, Greg Davier. Precinct 6, Rafael Robirosa, and precinct 8, Prescott Colquitt. We have for precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Robirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt, and there are no other votes on this ballot. Precinct number 2 is Casey Christ. Precinct number 4 is Greg Davier. Precinct number 6 is Rafael Robirosa. Precinct number 8 is Prescott Colquitt. There are no other markings on this ballot. Precinct number 2 is Casey Christ. Precinct number 4 is Greg Davier. Precinct number 6 is Rafael Robirosa. Precinct number 8 is Prescott Colquitt. There are no other marks on this ballot. Precinct number 2 is Casey Christ. Precinct number 4 is Greg Davier. Precinct number 6 is Rafael Robirosa. Precinct number 8 is Prescott Colquitt. There are no other markings on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Robirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no other marks on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Robirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no other marks on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Robirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no other marks on this ballot. This is the final ballot in the ballot box. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Robirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no other marks on this ballot.
Robert Russ, I'll be right back.
All right, we'll now move on to Central, Las Cruces. Alrighty, we're on our Central tab. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Rovirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no other marks on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Rovirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no other marks on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Rovirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no other marks on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Rovirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no other marks on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Rovirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no other marks on this ballot. Precinct number 6, Rafael Rovirosa. There are no other marks on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Rovirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no other marks on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Rovirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no other marks on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Rovirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no other marks on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Rovirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no other marks on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, forgive me, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Rovirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no other marks on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Rovirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no other marks on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Rovirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no other marks on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Rovirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no other marks on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Rovirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no other marks on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Rovirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no other marks on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Rovirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no other marks on this ballot. This is our final ballot in the box. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 2, Greg Davier.
Number 4.
I'm sorry, forgive me. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Rovirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no other marks on this ballot. We'll now move on to our south yard of Chandlerina. For precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Rovirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no other marks on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Rovirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no other markings on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Rovirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no additional markings on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Rovirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no additional markings on this ballot. Precincts number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Rovirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no additional markings on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Rovirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no additional markings on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Rovirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no additional markings on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Rovirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no additional markings on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Rovirosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no additional markings on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Roby Rosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no additional markings on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Roby Rosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no additional markings on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Roby Rosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no additional markings on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Roby Rosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no additional markings on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Roby Rosa. There are no additional markings on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Roby Rosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott. There are no additional markings on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Roby Rosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no additional markings on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Roby Rosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no additional markings on this ballot. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Roby Rosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no additional markings on this ballot. This is the final ballot in the ballot box. Precinct number 2, Casey Christ. Precinct number 4, Greg Davier. Precinct number 6, Rafael Roby Rosa. Precinct number 8, Prescott Colquitt. There are no additional markings on this ballot.
Secretary, would you please announce the results of the election?
Yes, for precinct 2, Casey Christ received a total of 57 votes, uncontested. He wins the election for precinct 2. For precinct 4, we have Greg Davier with 57 total votes. He is uncontested. He wins the election for precinct 4. For precinct 6, we have Rafael Roby Rosa with 58 votes. Uncontested, he wins the election for precinct 6. For precinct 8, we have Prescott Colquitt with 56 votes. He was uncontested and wins the election for precinct 8.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. We also have a resolution, the Elfin Butte Irrigation District certification of canvass results and election. It reads, we, the Board of Directors, acting as the Board of Canvassers of Elfin Butte Irrigation District, canvass is certified pursuant to NMSA 1978, Statute 73-10-15. The Board of Directors election held on December 2nd, 2025, and certify that the canvass results sent to the office of county clerk of Doñana County and any other applicable county clerk is a correct canvass of returns of said election. I will accept a motion accepting the acclamation of the results by Madam Secretary and the approval of the certification of canvass results and election.
That motion.
I have that motion made by Director Ludwig, seconded by Mr. Garai. Any discussion? And to repeat that motion, Madam Secretary, that motion is confirming the results read by acclamation and approving the resolution certifying the result of an election. Any further discussion?
Mr. President, I just have a question.
Yes,
Are the ballots preserved for a certain amount of time in case anybody else wants to look at them?
Mr. Lutz.
Yes, I
Yes.
believe they are.
And I think that'd probably be controlled by the general election code, wouldn't it?
That's the fallback, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Opinion of the president, the ayes have it, the motion passes unanimously. The election results are certified. That brings us to the next item on our agenda, the Water Resources Report. Good morning, Dr. King.
Good morning. Let me get set up here and I'll get started. Okay, are you seeing my screen all right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, well, first off, what I'd like to start with is a preliminary look at the end of 2025 accounting. And if I can find my, well, let's just see if this works. Okay. I do want to make clear that this is basically a first cut at it that I did. This is not coming from Reclamation, though the inputs are. So this is my preliminary look at it. I will tell you that particularly on the release from Caballo, that number, every time I download the data, it seems like I get a slightly different total release from Caballo. So this is intended not to present anything final. It's just intended to kind of give you a little bit of insight into what the beginning of 2026 will look like. So as of October 31st, and I forgot to put the date on there, but it's October 31st, which the operating agreement specifies as the end date for the current year's allocation and accounting. In other words, we finalize the annual allocation based on October 31st conditions. We had 87 and change in Elephant Butte Reservoir, about 15,000 in Caballo for total project storage of about 102,000. The Rio Grande Compact Credit, that number is held constant all year long. So I have included it in this one. That will change when we start the allocation in 2026 to reflect the compact accounting for 2025 when that's finalized. San Juan Chama, we had 4,100 acre feet, so total usable storage is 91,000. That total usable storage is simply the total storage minus the credit in San Juan Chama water. We also have minimum pools in Elephant Butte and Caballo of 12,000 in Caballo and 10,000 in Elephant Butte. However, that compact credit water and San Juan Chama water fills part of that. So we only have an additional 10,000, I would say, not releasable. This 248,440, that's the number that I got a while back. I've gotten several different numbers since then using the same data source. So hopefully that will stabilize. I did share my calculations with Reclamation and EP1, so I hope to get feedback from them on this, and we'll basically go through our iterative process till we get it right. So the released from Caballo usable storage and not releasable, we had those all up. And basically for the 2026 season, we had about 329,000 acre feet available, of which we released 248. EBID's charges, and James will say that's not my number. That is the number with a we had a slight over delivery to Mexico, which we try to always do, because if you're going to have an over delivery or an under delivery where international treaties are concerned, you want to err on the side of slight over delivery. It was about 1,700 acre feet. So that's charged to the two districts, 5743. Mexico's actual delivery was 13,468. So the total charges were 214.17. That gives a diversion ratio of 0.861, which is actually quite a bit higher than what I was estimating at the beginning of the year. I'm not quite sure why that was. It was an odd year with the clog and everything, but as we go through this to finalize it, we'll take a look at what I was allocating, I believe, at 0.78 in the last allocation. So we did do a lot better than I was expecting. What that means then is with EBID's final allocation of 113,000 minus the charges of 79.9, we wind up with carryover of about 33,000 going into next year. And similarly, EP1 winds up with carryover of about 24,000. Now, this being the last one, it's a little bit convoluted because we do have those charges plus the ACE credit and things coming in. The most important takeaway here is the general magnitude of these carryover numbers, because that's what will go into next year's initial allocation. So let me ask if there are any questions on that before I move on.
Dr. King, I've got a question on the release from Caballo. What's the range of discrepancy we're talking about?
The last time I did it, I was off this by about 300 acre feet.
So
I think I had 300 acre feet more release, más o menos.
So given that we've got at least 3 digits precision, what's the accuracy of the meter reading out of Caballo?
2% is sort of the standard default number.
So that's
but
2 digits.
it's
So that's 2
Go
digits
ahead.
of precision. How much of the rest of that is just noise? That's eventually what I'm getting at. If we've got a discrepancy, we're having trouble kind of sorting it out. How much of that is just random?
We don't have Jerry Melendez on here, but it isn't due to noise in the meter readings. It's due to rehandling of the source data. I'm downloading these directly from the Reclamation website, and they keep changing in that database.
All right, that explains all of it. Thank you very much, Dr. King.
Okay, anything else? Okay. This is what things looked like as of December 4th, which as of yesterday evening was the most recent data I had. We have 124,000 in Elephant Butte, 15 in Caballo. So total project storage is about 140,000. This estimated Rio Grande Compact credit, here I am using a number that I got from Jerry Melendez at Reclamation as their current estimate for what Colorado's credit will be going into 2026. And since we're looking forward to 2026, that's the number I am using there. as opposed to the 7,200 I used in the last slide. San Juan Chama, that's still the most recent number I have. It's actually from October 31st, so this isn't quite current there. Usable project storage then of about 130. Not releasable would be, that doesn't look right. I think I'll need to rework that. But the bottom line is we're looking at about 108,000 acre feet of releasable water right now. And we are picking water up at about 1,300 acre feet per day, which is about 650 cubic feet per second, more than I expected at this particular time of year. And we've got some water on the way. I'll get to that when I get to the river upstream. As you see, our snow water equivalent, this has improved in the last, I want to say, week and a half, 2 weeks, and we'll take a look at the snow chart there. But total precipitation is looking pretty good. Snow water equivalent is a bit light, and it did improve. If we look at the snow traces, the green line you see here, this is Rio Grande headwaters, which is everything up the Rio Grande, basically up in Colorado. And then this is the upper Rio Grande, which is the Rio Grande between the Colorado state line and Otoe Gauge, just below the confluence of Rio Grande and Rio Chama. And you see that we got off to a slow start. The green line is the median. The blue line is last year. And last year, you see last year started out quite good at in both these basins, but then it flatlined. It just quit coming. Our snow season started out promising and then stalled. We are hoping that won't happen now. The black line you see is this year, and this is up to yesterday. So you see that we're below median, below last year, but our big hope is that it doesn't stop this year like it did last year and just flatline.
Dr. King, we have a question. Mr. Rogarosa.
Thank you. Dr. King, I thought that on the previous page, this is snow water equivalent. Okay, this is not precipitation.
No, this is strictly snow water equivalent. Yes, good point.
Thank you.
And these are both from NRCS, but the basins are defined a little bit different. The upper Rio Grande here includes the San Juans in Colorado. The Rio Chama is strictly Rio Chama, and then you've got the Sangre de Cristos and the Jemez. So they're different basin divisions too. But you're exactly right. This is just looking at the snow water equivalent. This is what's happening. As I recall, the last couple of meetings we had questions about what was going to happen with, at the end of the year. There's typically a letdown of a delivery of water to Elephant Butte Reservoir, and the Army Corps of Engineers issued a schedule for that. It started on well, let's see. This is an image, so I can't see it, but it started like on November 30th. They started stepping up the release from Abiquiu, and the intention is that they'll punch this water all the way down to Elephant Butte Reservoir. And you see they are stair-stepping it up. They have peaked now at about 1,400 CFS, this is all exactly according to their schedule. They will then start ramping this down and finish the release on what they have stated on finishing this movement of water from Abiquiu down to Elephant Butte on December 17th, so that the release will make its way down to Elephant Butte roughly by the end of the calendar year. If we look at some gauges here, you can see the effect of this activity. You see up here at Otoe, which again is just downstream of the confluence with Rio Chama, so that water is flowing past Otoe. And you see this little hop it's taking right here. I believe that is the release from Abiquiu coming into the Rio Grande. If we go downstream to Albuquerque, you can see a similar, slightly later hop here as that water arrives there. And notice that these aren't linear scales. That change is actually up over 1,000 CFS. So they're releasing 1,400. The hop here is about, I think, 1,300 because it attenuates a little bit as it moves down. But if we look down at the floodwet San Marcial, obviously this is a gauge that has issues, but I don't really see it arriving yet. Yet we still are getting that 1,300 acre feet per day in. So this will help us a bit as we go in. I went through and did a daily, took their daily average releases and integrated it for this period from November 30th up to December 13th. And I got about 32,000 acre feet of water that they're going to be releasing from Abiquiu, hoping that as much of that as possible will make it down to Elephant Butte. This is where.
Okay, one question, Mr. Roverosa. Thank you, Mr. President. Do they stair step it up just to see how the river performs?
That's certainly a part of it. They've got those that capacity limitation. I haven't kept up with as you recall, they had a sediment plug where they couldn't even get to their traditional capacity of 1,800 CFS, and I know they did some work on it. Obviously, they did because they're releasing 1,400, but that is certainly. You don't want to just throw the gates open and let it rip. You want to kind of step it up so that you can, see how the system's performing. As far as getting the water downstream, they're good. It's the same volume regardless of how they manage it. The same volume released. Anything else on that?
No, thank you.
Okay, looking at now from the mountains from the reservoirs to the mountains to the rivers. Here we go to the atmosphere or climate at least. What you see here is for the January, February, March. This is a forecast that was done on November 20th. I imagine that if they did it again today, they would probably come up with something very similar. What you see is on the precipitation side, it is forecast to be lower precipitation throughout the Rio Grande watershed and above average. Again, that's generally the case. I did pull up one other forecast that they did, which is the December 13th to 17th. So this is issued on December 7th. It just came out yesterday. And a couple of reasons that I pulled this out, you see that for December 13th to the 17th, they're really forecast, the chances really are for below average precipitation. But I didn't even know they went to this color on the temperature probabilities. And I should explain a little bit. This very dark red here does not mean that it's going to be 100 degrees out there in the middle of December. What it means is that the probability of being above average is very high down here, probably like in the 80 to 90 or maybe even 90 to 100% chance of being above average. Same with precipitation. This is not saying that the precipitation is going to be particularly way below average, but it's got a 50 to 60% chance of being below average. So a lot of uncertainty, but this is the way things are pointing. Looking at the drought monitor, I think due to that early precipitation that you saw in the table that showed both snow water equivalent and total precipitation, this the watershed being mostly in moderate with a few patches, little patches of other, of severe or abnormally dry. It feels worse than that, but because of that precipitation, I'm thinking that the instantaneous look at the drought is not as bad as it feels like. If we look at the seasonal forecast, this is a little more consistent with my intuition on it, and that is that the rest of the watershed, except for way up at the top here, drought development is likely. Of course, La Nina is still present. This hasn't changed. The ANSO neutral conditions developing in January to March. Last month, I think it was at 55% chance. They've upgraded that to 61% chance. But we remain in La Nina, which, kind of goes in, influences all that, all those forecasts for temperature and precipitation that we talked about. So finally, as I say, it has not changed that 2026 is likely to be a critically short supply year. I did toy around with what things would look like if we were doing a 2026 allocation right now, and basically it doesn't work, because you remember we've got about 55,000 acre feet of carryover between the two districts. When you remove, well, let's back up. We had 107,000 releasable at this point. Mexico's allocation is based on the total releasable and the D1 curve. If you plug that 107 number into D1, it's below the 0 point. So Mexico's allocation would, in theory, be 0. If you take the total release, the 107, and you subtract out the storage associated with that 55,000 acre feet of carryover, you have to assume a diversion ratio to convert it to storage, but you wind up below the 0 point for D2. So there wouldn't be any D2 allocation of this year's water. We do have that water coming down, and let's hope that 30,000 of that makes it to Elephant Butte Reservoir. We've got still warmer and drier than normal conditions. We're really, how 2026 plays out is very dependent on whether our snowpack continues to grow, as we hope it will, or if it flatlines like it did in 2025. I don't see that there's any way that we get a release before the end of May or early June, and I don't see our allotment getting past 4 inches. That's kind of where we stand. It's still wait and see. We'll wait until this release makes it down from Abiquiu by the end of the year, and see what kind of base flow we have left. But we should have a lot clearer picture both on the river flow, this winter river flow, or I guess it's technically late spring, but the river flow, the residual river flow after that delivery is done, and then how our snowpack is looking. January will be a much clearer picture. And with that, I will throw it open for questions.
Mr. Clayfield.
Dr. King, I'm gonna ask you for an opinion. This may be
Okay.
outside your area of expertise, but I'm gonna ask anyway. Given the current situation and the fact that New Mexico owes Texas a substantial amount of water, do you anticipate that Texas will sue New Mexico for delivery of that water?
If my understanding of it is, and keep in mind, this is an engineer's understanding, so don't take this to the bank. The compact has an explicit limit on New Mexico's accrued deficit which is 200,000 acre feet. If they pass that, I think it's really likely that Texas would sue. And I don't know the legalities of if they would sue preemptively.
Thank you.
Mr. Roverosa. Thank you, Mr. President. Dr. King, what fraction of our total, of total river flows do you think come from that very top part of the watershed that is not projected to be in drought? If you go back pages to the map.
It's not currently in drought.
Right.
You talking about this part up here?
Yes, what fraction of the total stream flows do you think come from that portion of New Mexico stream flows?
Well, it's highly variable. I believe that about 80% of the number that I remember, and this is an old number, so it may have changed. I haven't broken it down lately, but something on the order of 80% comes from upstream of Otoe Gauge. And I don't know how it breaks down between
That seems good.
the headwaters and the upper Rio Grande. It varies about, which comes from the east side of the San Luis Valley and how much comes from the west side of the San Luis Valley, because they can be really quite different depending on how the storms roll in. But figure 80% comes from the northern New Mexico and southern Colorado.
Is the upper Rio Grande considered the east side of the San Luis Valley? Or rather, is the east side of the San Luis Valley considered upper Rio Grande and the west side is the headwaters?
Well, again, it depends on who you're talking to. Here, the upper Rio Grande is the Rio Grande between the state line and Otoe Gauge. Whereas in the other one, it excludes Rio Chama, because Rio Chama is separated out in this one. So it's a little bit of it's a little confusing to, have two measures of upstream precipitation that use different boundaries. I should probably just standardize on one. In fact, I think I'll do that. I can do the same using these same basins. I can look at total precipitation too. So I'll start doing that just to alleviate that confusion.
Dr. King, would you go back to the drought monitor graph, please?
To the which?
The drought monitor figure, sorry.
This one?
No, that one, yeah. Oops. The other one, please.
This one?
Yes, thank you. So just to be sure I understand the answer to Director Roverosa's question. The part of the Rio Grande Basin in Colorado is currently showing essentially no drought intensity.
Right.
Once it crosses the New Mexico state line, there's varying amounts of drought intensity. You made a statement that approximately 80% of the water for New Mexico comes in above Otoe Gauge.
Right. And that's a very gross number and probably dated. I haven't gone back and looked at it, but in sort of a different climate, that was the rule of thumb. But that may have changed.
So above Otoe Gauge would include flows across the Colorado-New Mexico line,
Yes.
flows from the Rio Chama,
Yes.
flows from the Sangre de Cristos, essentially north of Espanola.
Yes.
And then flows below Otoe Gauge would include portions of that range around Santa Fe. And then tributary flows between Santa Fe and Elfin Butte.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions? Director Colquitt.
Dr. King, how we doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Good, good. Hey, how long is it gonna take for those 30,000 acre feet to get to Elephant View from Abiquiu down?
I expect it to start hitting any day now.
Okay.
Maybe even today. And
Okay.
it will trail out, they're estimating to the end of the calendar year, and that sounds about right.
Okay.
Should we expect north of 70% of that to make it to the view if it flows? Or is that too high of a?
Well, it's going to be confusing because we do have a bit of base flow in there already too.
Mhm.
So I don't, what shows up is what shows up. And that's what will be used for compact accounting and then be available to us for 2026. I think it may be informative to try to do a little base flow separation to try to figure out exactly how much of that release made it and how much of it was the background base flow. But that's the kind of thing that I'll talk about with EP1 and reclamation once once it's over.
Thank you, Dr. King. I appreciate the robust discussion. This is the time for us to start seriously considering how we are going to adapt to this year's water season and ensure that we are leaning as far forward as we can, providing our members information on that. Things I want to recap. We are below the D1 0 point. What does that mean? D1 represents the amount of water deliverable to the members of the Rio Grande project at their head gates, given an amount of release. That is the entire.
And to Mexico at the Azteca Madre.
Thank you very much. So by project, that means all the way to Tornillo, Texas. If there's an amount of water that's released, how much of it is deliverable to farm head gates if everyone has to get the same amount of water to their head gate? And that's approximately 120,000 acre feet. At 120,000 acre feet of release, the expectation is 0 water is deliverable to the head gates of our farmers. 0. Since
I would point out though that the lowest annual release during the D2 period was 206,000 acre feet in 1964. And so when you when you extrapolate down to 120,000 acre feet, you're really stretching it, and the regression relationship falls apart.
thank you very much. So that's a fuzzy number because we've never gotten down to that level to empirically test it.
Yeah,
All right.
the lowest we've ever gotten was 168,000 in 2013.
We're gonna learn.
We need to seriously consider what the policy of this board will be for when we choose to release water and when we choose to wait and release it with next year's inflow. And again, the Water Resources Committee, the two fairly obvious numbers are if it's under 100,000 releasable, EBID is not calling for its water. If it's over 200,000, we likely will call for its water, our water. And we are likely to be in between those two numbers this year.
I would agree that we'll be in that 100, you might even say 120 to 200 range.
So. In
200 feels a
talking,
little optimistic. Never thought he'd say that. But
in talking with members, what our members think of is allotment. What's my allotment? All the rest of this is implementation details that don't mean something to them directly. I'm starting to hear constituents say that if the allotment is under 6 inches, wait, release it next year with next year's allotment. Give me the water in a larger quantity in a longer season so that I can use it appropriately. Don't try to make me take 3 inches of water. There are going to be constituents that feel differently. You should be talking with as many members as you possibly can right now about the possibility of not having a release. And at what level of allotment they would concur that that's a good idea. The Water Resources Committee is talking about this every month, trying to come up with good recommendations for this board. But ultimately, we're going to need the feedback from our board members, and you're going to need the feedback from your constituent members on how we proceed. And in the meantime, we'll just hope that a gobble of water will flow down and we'll be over 200,000 acre feet of releasable storage and we don't have to worry about it this year. But that's not looking likely. Director Clayshaw.
What happens if EBID wants released and EP number 1 is not, or vice versa?
So if EBID wants to release and EP1 does not. So that one gets weird because the water doesn't show up in the vicinity of El Paso. So there's some treaty weirdness there. Dr. King.
Well, the treaty weirdness, I think you can expect that in any case if, you know, if we, I think we will get over the 0 point for D1. We'll get over the 0 point on current year's water for D2 also. But again, we're so far down there that, you know, in 2013, Mexico's allocation was 36 or 3,700 acre feet was all. I wouldn't be surprised if we have some discussions about, you know, other ways of allocating to Mexico, although, you know, what we have in the operating agreement is exactly that D1 analysis. It would be easier. What would get more complicated, I think, is if El Paso wanted to release water and EBID did not. Because, you know, we would have to, if Mexico comes on, then we're on diversion accounting and, you know, we could use all the water just getting El Paso their allocation. So, you know, it basically wouldn't be available for the next year. But there are so many possibilities here, and we certainly need to be thinking about them. I agree with the chairman that you need to be talking to your constituents about how they would like to see this play out, because it's not going to be pretty in any case.
I will make one note that I believe is a correction to what you just said, Dr. King. If it takes all of the water to get EP1 their allocation, EBID did not have any allocation anyways. So we
well,
didn't
if we're on diversion accounting, and it wouldn't be all of it, but it would be a big chunk of it.
Okay. That is something that the Water Resources Committee is considering. What happens if EP1 calls for water and we don't? Certainly, while EBID is on, we're on diversion accounting. Once EBID consumes its allocation, we're on release accounting. So the question is, how many days of release accounting would there be in a critically short supply year? And what's the wet water difference to EBID in those days?
Right. Well, this is where, we do need to coordinate certainly with EP1 on their plans. I've been trying to get a meeting set up for that, but I think they're a little more confident that we'll at least get to 2013 conditions. And at 2013 conditions, in the discussions we've had in previous board meetings, we would probably go with a 4-inch allotment. James, pipe in if you see that any different.
No, I agree.
And that's approximately 170,000 acre feet.
Right.
We're currently at 110.
Yeah, but again, we will. There's a reason why NRCS doesn't start doing forecasts until January, and that's because there's still so much uncertainty.
Thank you.
So we can't predict how much water will be here. What we can do is set predictable policy about what we'll do with the water that does get there. And that's what I'm asking you all to consider. Those are the difficult decisions that our members have elected us to think hard about and guide the district in the most advantageous way we can.
Well, I hope congratulations are in order to the newly reelected board members.
Thank you, Dr. King. Mr. Serrano.
Mr. President, thank you for just a quick minute to clarify a few things or just make some points from the state's perspective. Dr. King's calculation of 30,000 is really, really close. So we're planning to release 28,000 acre feet from upstream storage. That's impressive. Dr. King earned his paycheck today. Also, with regards to flows out of Chama, out of the Active Reservoir and Rio Chama, that 1,400 CFS, we haven't seen that sort of capacity in over a year and a half, almost 2 years now. And that's a testament to the work that a lot of different entities have done up there. The state pitched in, you'll recall, and we did several $1 million worth of channel work in there to make sure we cleared the plug that was there. The fact that we're pushing 1,400 CFS now, we're not seeing any overbanking, that will serve itself nicely as we get into the runoff season. Hopefully we'll be able to convey more water down there from Butte. And then lastly, I just wanted to address Mr. Clayshaw's comments about the compact. We currently have about 125,000 acre feet of compact there. With this release, part of that decision making was to make sure that we don't increase too much, right? So we don't anticipate increasing that debit a whole lot. It will increase a little bit. Again, the limit is 200,000 acre feet. And the state, again, is doing a lot of work with our partners in the middle Rio Grande to ensure that we're not getting anywhere close to 200,000. We don't anticipate a challenge from Texas. That's always unforeseen. However, we're doing everything we can to avoid a compact violation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Serrano.
Yeah, and one other thing I was gonna mention that Ryan just reminded me of, with that, with that repaired channel capacity up there, if we do get a decent snow melt, we will be able, they won't have to hold it upstream and let it down slowly. I don't expect a 2019 kind of water year, but that will help in them not only getting the water down, but getting it down earlier in the year when we can use it.
And a final comment on compact debit. It is my opinion that it is extraordinarily unlikely that Mexico will come close to that 200,000 acre foot limit this year because there's no water. They don't create, there's zero water, their debit will increase zero, even though none of it makes it to the Butte. And so the potential for increasing the debit is directly related to the total quantity of water that's coming into the system over a year. Dr. King?
I was gonna ask, Ryan, do you have a feel for the annual debit or credit this year?
So we're thinking probably 10 to 15,000 foot range. That's approximate. It all depends on how much makes it down right now. Everything's
Right.
looking, the channel's working well, so in that range,
Yeah, 10 or 15 debit?
it increase over 126, yes, sir.
Okay, I got you.
Other questions? Again, I appreciate the extended discussion on this. This is these are the big questions facing the board over the next 4 months. Mr. Narvaez, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, sir.
Dr. King?
I would just, my general tendency, obviously the decision is up to the board, but my general feel is that if you can manage to make a release and divert, do so, just for the health of the system, the health, I'm concerned, and we will have to do some analysis on this, but that not releasing in a given year, releasing in 2026, whatever we do have, will get us more total water than if we were to let it ride and try to use it in 2027. But again, let's try to, as the conditions clarify going into January, I think we'll have a clearer view and we can narrow down the possibilities enough that we can look at some real alternatives.
Thank you very much, Dr. King. That brings us to general administrative. Mr. Franzoy.
So just touching base on our monthly cash flow report, cash is moving up year over year. We are on pace to hit the reserve amount discussed by the budget committee, which was one entire year of cash flows. However, we might modify that in the future. We're showing a lot of cash in the bank. That's really related to assessments that are flowing in, changes for some grant expenditures that we're going to have, and for payroll. Our interest year over year, if you're looking right here, it's about the same level as it was last year in 2025. Interest rates are dropping down, as I'm sure most of you know. Year to date, we've collected about 25% of our fiscal year 26 assessments. Those interest rates shown at the bottom are approximately 4%. And we have no extraordinary revenues. This month we did receive about 68K in auction proceeds, and we are kind of in the process of receiving reimbursement for some of our ISC grant purchases. The level that we're at right now, I believe, is about 3.2 million range, three-ish million expended by EBID. I believe 2.4 million of that has been reimbursed. We'll call it 2.5. So we're on par with that. And we're looking at making some purchases here in the near future and getting reimbursed for those. And they've been very prompt in their reimbursement process for us. And that is my update there. So I will move it over to Leah for the next agenda items.
Thank you very much, Mr. Francois. Yes.
Thank you. Is this sure? Yes. Okay, perfect. All right. Okay. So we have this contract going up for its yearly renewal. This is gonna be year 2 of 4 for Devore and Argonne. And it's for our state lobbyist services. The services are usually during the state legislative sessions. And also the services that are listed in the scope of work on the end of the contract. Nothing changed with the contract this year. There were no changes. The amount that we pay them is listed right here in the compensation area, number 2.
And that's a fixed fee equating to 45,000 a year.
Thank you very much, Ms. Diaz. So we have the contract in front of us for the renewal for our lobbyist services. I will note my arithmetic comes to 40,000, not 45, or
Maybe that's right.
discussion. First, what is the will of the board?
I move to approve the contract.
I have a motion to approve the contract,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Ludwig. Discussion. Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Being the president, the ayes have it, the motion passes unanimously. Contract is renewed.
Okay, and the next item on the agenda is our contract for our audit services for our fiscal year 2025.
If I may interrupt for one moment. Madam Secretary, I'll note that I do not have the audit contract for signature. Please proceed.
There's some question on that that I have. So the audit contract,
To
oh,
your left. 100% up there.
can you see it? Okay, okay.
And is that contract actually being shared? I see the green frame around it. That looks like it.
Go ahead and hit share there.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. This audit contract is a new contract with a new firm. For the last 2 years, we had Fiero and Fiero CPAs doing our audit. This year, due to internal restructuring on their side, they were unable to complete our audit. So we went out for a request for quote. We sent our request out to multiple audit firms that are approved by the Office of Estate Auditing. And the contract that we signed was with SJT Group out of Albuquerque. The lead auditor will be Joshua Trujillo. The contract was approved through the Office of the State Auditors last month. My question for the board for you would be, when on this particular contract, I did notice on the minutes from last year, it was approved by the board. How does that work since this contract was approved through the state?
That's a very good question. Actually, I'm gonna have a question for you, Mr. Lutz. What is the requirement of this body for approving our auditor? Ms. Diaz, Mr. Francois?
I mean, it's regulatory requirement. The idea that I would have, and David could probably correct me on this, is that it is approved by the state auditor in terms of our contract. However, it is ratified by the board. That, what do you would think, David?
So, thank you very much. Mr. Lutz?
I would tend to agree with Mr. Franzoy. My off the top of the head opinion is analogous to when we were looking at the land relinquishment policy. You have to get state approval if you're going to relinquish any property above a certain level, but it's still something the board has to approve. So you've gotten a step of getting state approval of your audit contract, but it's still a contract with Elephant Butte that the board should ratify or approve.
So this board could still vote to not approve this contract?
My feeling is yes, you would go back into procurement process and then start over. Of course, you have to have an audit.
You will be subject to penalty under the deadline of getting a auditor selected.
Sure.
That's good.
I'm just making it like that. If the board doesn't have the option not to approve it, then it doesn't have the authority to approve it either, would be my point. As long as we retain both of those options, then I would agree. It just seems like a contract that we have to approve. Is this contract, so back to my question on signature, is this a contract that requires the signature of the approving body?
I think that would be a question for Mr. Lutz. For the Office of the State Auditor, you'll see below that for it to be approved through their system, I had to sign it, Mr. Trujillo had to sign it. So I don't know what kind of signatures would be needed from the board, if any.
That gets a little weird. Is it just a resolution approving it? I guess we could also delegate signature authority to the CPO.
Yeah. I don't remember how we did it last year.
I'm gonna suggest delegating signature authority to CPO is sufficient unless Mr. Lutz feels otherwise.
I think that's sufficient.
Very good. So we have a contract in front of us for auditor services. And also, because of the process of selecting an auditor, we would be delegating the signatory authority to the CPO of the district. We'll start with what is the will of the board? We were to delegate signature authority to the CPO of the district to sign this contract. And approve the contract. And approve the contract. Second. I have a motion from Director Roborussa, seconded by Director Colquitt to approve this, the fiscal year 2025 audit contract and to delegate signature authority to the CPO. Discussion. I had a question regarding cost.
Sure.
How does this compare to the cost of our last auditor?
The last auditor, we paid 19,355, and this year it's 27,000. So
Thank you.
it did go up.
That number doesn't include the single audit in there, right?
No.
Because I know that the price was up significantly due to potential for a single audit, but we will not be having a single audit.
For what it's worth, that price seems very reasonable to me.
Given the level of cash that's been moving, I think that that's very reasonable.
Further discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Opinion of the president, the ayes have it, the motion passes unanimously. Mr. Diaz, Mr. Francois, is there anything further?
Yes, sir.
No, sir.
That brings us to the HR and safety update. Ms. Maciel, are you online?
I am.
You have the floor.
I apologize. Give me a second. Let me pull it back up real quick. I think I shut it down.
It's still sharing.
So we're sharing your HR and safety report.
Okay. So we currently have an employee count of 83. We still have a job opening for ditch rider up north. The reason we're doing that is just because it is very difficult to find people up there. So we're just keeping it open and looking for the individual that will help Mike the most. We did open a job internally for an engineering tech, which is actually has an individual who was a ditch rider who has applied for it. We will not be backfilling his position. So if that individual is accepted for that position, then we will move forward with that. Any questions on the positions other than that?
None presented.
Okay. Years of service, we don't have any like 5, 10, 15 years of service for December, but we do have 3 individuals who have years of service for the month of December. Mel Pizarro in the Central with 2 years, Marcos Hernandez in the South with 8 years, and myself with 17 years. Upcoming training, we are doing some defensive driving training in December, which is tomorrow, for 2 individuals. And then I believe Joa is finalizing all of the security equipment for the Las Cruces yard, the Hatch and Chamberino yards with some ISC grant money, I believe. We have 2 employees out with FMLA intermittent, which means they are working. They just might take time off to help with family members or themselves who are out on FMLA. I do have one employee who is out on FMLA. He will be returning after the first of the year. Our offices will be closed at the end of December between noon on the 23rd, and we will be returning on January 5th. Any questions?
Questions on the HR and safety update? I don't see any. Thank you very much, Ms. Marcial.
Thank you.
That brings us to the engineering update.
Here, manager, I can comment for them if you guys would like an update.
Ms. Franzoy.
So I believe the Rincon Arroyo work has been completed. They're still finalizing the city of Las Cruces. I believe we're expected to receive payment for that pretty soon. Is that right, Leah? In addition to that, we are in the midst of getting our dam work underway. We have external engineering working on our risk assessments for that. Our internal engineering is working on our category A mission, which is just kind of not heavy construction related to what Dam Safety Bureau comments would be. We did get out engineering designs for the Rincon lateral phase 1. We are still on hold with SHPO. There's some work related to that needs to be done. For phases 2 and 3 for the Rincon lateral, we did send those designs to NRCS. They are coming back with comments, but some of this grant work should be kicking off here in the near future. And then just regular routine maintenance.
Questions? Ms. Franzoy, would you remind me what phase 1 of the Rincon lateral project is?
So the Rincon lateral is broken out into 4 phases in totality, and phase 1 is related to piping a portion of the lateral and creating a separate piece of parallel habitat for the very most southern portion of the section.
Thank you. Is that the portion down Kit Carson?
Correct. I think it starts, it's M check, and I forget the other destination, but
Is that all downstream of the Arroyo?
yes, that portion is correct.
Thank you. Other questions? Madam Secretary, would you unshare that? Thank you. Brings calendar events, Ms. Franzoy.
So our next regularly scheduled board meeting will be this Wednesday, December 10th. There is no agenda items. It will be there. I think it'll just be an open and closed. I just wanted to note that it is December 10th. I believe there is a typo on our agenda. EBIDs.
Before you move past that event, Mr. Lutz. Do we need a board member present in this room to open and close it? Or could the board member do it via Zoom?
Additionally, we have had a board member present to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Lutz.
And I believe because of certain restrictions on Zoom appearances in the Open Meetings Act, I think if we could aspire to have someone here just to open it.
Thank you, Mr. Lutz. Ms. Franzoy.
A reminder that EBID will be having its winter shutdown. That'll be from Christmas Eve to the 4th of January. The offices will reopen on the 5th of January. A regularly scheduled board meeting will be January 14th. The New Mexico legislative session from January 20th to February 19th will be held in Santa Fe. And Josh wanted me to request approval for travel for that.
What travel is being, what specifically, what's the travel request the board's going to be approving?
I believe it will be however many board members you would like and potentially one staff. However, I believe that Josh and myself will be out for that trip unless you wanted to send staff in place of Josh and myself.
So the request is for approval for one trip to Santa Fe during the session.
Correct, I believe so.
Mr. Roverosa,
I think, Mr. President, I think it probably needs to be more than that. This is pertinent dates opening, Mesilla Valley Days and Soil and Water Conservation Day, that's at least.
Okay, yeah, you're right.
so those three pertinent dates we're expecting to potentially have travel, is that correct, Mr. Francois, Mr. Roverosa?
Correct.
Yes, and maybe more, and anything comes up unexpectedly, we need to be at community meetings or anything like that.
So how do we, so unexpectedly,
Unexpected meetings, yeah, just difficult to approve.
My recommendation would be throughout the entire period to approve board and staff travel.
what is the proper way to form that motion? What are we because we need to know exactly what we're approving for travel, I would expect. Mr. Lutz, do you have suggestions? Is there,
Think of the open-ended nature of it.
is there a way to approve something with a limit? That as long as we're under that limit to either days, person days, I don't even know how to describe it.
I think you could, I mean, I think the way you have it agendaed, you have these specific items. Seems to be that those seem to be your parameters.
Thank you, Mr. Roverosa.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe that there are some committee meetings that we may need to attend that are not on this. And what if we were to just approve travel for like you were suggesting, person days, so say up to 6 travel events for up to 2 board members per event.
Mr. Lutz, the non-specificity of that.
And I'm just. My feeling is that you've highlighted the New Mexico legislative session to request travel approval related to the session. You do have some specific pertinent dates, but I think you'd at least have, at least from a notice standpoint of agenda, and indicating to the public you're going to be approving travel to the legislature. So I think what Mr. Roverosa or Director Roverosa is proposing is acceptable.
Very good. So let's go ahead and get that into the form of a motion and include include staff in that. So however many person days you think is appropriate.
Okay, I move to approve travel for reasons related to New Mexico legislative session for up to 6 events and up to 2 board members and 1 staff member per event.
So up to, okay, thank you. Seconded by Director Garai. So the motion on the floor is to approve travel for up to 6 trips. Each trip having up to 2 board members and 1 staff member. Discussion. Hearing none, discussion is closed. I'm sorry, I do have one question. Mr. Franzoy, has there been a change in the requested travel policy of this board for whether we're doing travel via per diem or actual expenses and?
I would just recommend doing it for actuals. I am currently under review with that with our external financial services.
You accept that as a friendly amendment to your motion, next, Mr. Gurad, yeah. All right, so the motion is for up to 6 trips or up to 2 board members and 1 staff member for the actual expenses incurred. Any further discussion? Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any of the president of the ayes have it, the motion passed unanimously. Mr. Franzoy.
The last thing to put on your calendar is the January 20th through 22nd Irrigation Leaders Workshop in Chandler, Arizona. We are also requesting approval for travel there. I know that I will be presenting for 2 speaking
time slots, I guess is kind of the way to put that. And I don't know if Josh is planning to go or how many board members you guys would like to go.
Thank you very much. I will mention again, the Irrigation Leaders Workshop is excellent training for board members. I would encourage board members that have never attended that to attend it this year. I will be attending at least a day of it for I'm presenting on one of the topics. So January 20th through 22nd in Chandler, Arizona. What is the will of the board?
I move to approve travel for up to 4 board members and 2 members of staff for the Irrigation Leaders Workshop.
Second.
All actually looks great.
I have a motion from Director Rosa, seconded by Director Colquitt to approve travel for all actual expenses for 4 board members and 2 staff members, excuse me, to the Irrigation Leaders Workshop, January 20th through 22nd in Chandler, Arizona. Discussion. Hearing none, discussion is closed. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Being the president, the ayes have it, the motion passes unanimously. Madam Secretary, I will be attending, and I will coordinate with you on how much travel I will require for that.
And that is the last the updates for the calendar events.
Madam Secretary, how much lead time do you want from the other board members that will be attending in order to arrange travel?
Certainly, 2 weeks would be a minimum. 3
So-
weeks would be preferable.
So that brings us to January 1st. By January 1st, we need to have identified and inform Madam Secretary which board members will be attending the Irrigation Leaders Workshop. That brings us to the conclusion of our open agenda. Are there any other open agenda items? Any other further announcements? Hearing none, I will accept the motion to go into closed session. Motion the agenda to closed session item.
Motion, so.
Second. I have a motion from Director Colquitt, seconded by Director Rosa to go into closed session to discuss the agenda closed session items. I have to wait for one of the board members to come back.
What I want to do is project by project. Here's what. Versus how much we're gonna do this there. For everything for EBID versus what we would estimate a contract would cost and. Contractor estimates.
Mr. Franzoy, if I may interrupt you for a moment, would you please go let my board members know that I need one of them to come back?
Okay.
I need to go to the bathroom so bad. Old John by his hair, ear hair. I can, John.
May I interrupt real quick?
You may, I'm waiting for board members that can conduct a vote, so please.
Casey's not here today.
Thank you very much. Motion on the floor is to go into closed session. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Being the president, the ayes have it, the motion passes, and we're in closed session. With no other items to cover in closed session, I will accept the motion to come out of closed session.
Motion so made.
I have a motion made by Director Garai, seconded by Director Colquitt to come out of closed session. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Being the president, the ayes have it. Motion passes unanimously. We are back in open session. I will note for the record that no items were discussed in closed session other than those mentioned in the motion to go into closed session, which were the agenda closed session items. Is there any further open session business?
No.
Hearing none, I will accept the motion to adjourn.
So made.
I have a motion by Director Rise, seconded by Director Colquitt to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? In the opinion of the president, the ayes have it. The motion passes unanimously. It is 1:40 PM and we are adjourned.
Thank you, guys.